Hey guys, in this video I'm going to be putting the latest flagships from Google head to head, the Google Nexus 6P versus the Google Nexus 5X. So first off, let's go ahead and take a close look at the hardware of each device. Now the Nexus 5X is actually a very light phone. It's nicely built and it doesn't feel cheap at all, at least to me. Its back feels very similar to the matte finish on the 2013's Nexus 5's back. And it's got front-facing speakers, but they're mono, and they don't get too loud in my opinion. The 6P on the other hand is made out of aluminum, and the color I have here is, well, it's called aluminum. Its metal makes it feel very well built and gives off a very premium cold feel in the hand. And also it's got front-facing speakers, but unlike the 5X, it actually has stereo front-facing speakers which get stupid loud and just overall provide a much more immersive experience when consuming content. On the bottom, the 6P has the USB Type-C port, while the 5X has a USB Type-C port as well, along with a 3.5mm headphone jack. And on the right, they both have their power buttons and their volume keys. The 6P, however, does have a textured power button, so it helps to differentiate between the volume keys and the power button. Now on the left hand side they both have their nano SIM card slots, and on the very top is where you'd find the 6P 3.5mm headphone jack, while the 5X has a mic. On the back is where you'd find both of the phone's cameras. They're both actually the same sensors. They're 12 megapixel sensors, and it's also where you'd find their fingerprint sensors along with their LED flashes. Now they're covered in different materials, so you can see the 6P actually has sort of like a visor here, and it's Gorilla Glass 4, so you have to be careful because I do have a feeling if this thing drops it is going to crack. Now the 5X's camera is also slightly raised, which again gets me scared when dropping this thing facing down from the camera. Now the fingerprint scanners have actually been a really nice addition to this year's lineup of Nexus devices. They're both really good. They both work just as accurately, just as fast, just as smooth. I can't really point one's advantage over the other. They're both more or less the same to me. Which fingerprint scanner is easier to reach will depend on the size of your hands. So if you have huge hands, 6P's fingerprint scanner would be easier for you, while if you have small hands, the 5X's would be better. Now as for specs, the 5X is packing a Qualcomm Snapdragon 808 processor. It's got a quad-core and a dual-core CPU. It's got an Adreno 418 graphics card, and it's got 2 gigs of RAM, and it comes in 16 and 32 gigabyte storage variants. The 6P on the other hand has a Qualcomm Snapdragon 810 processor. It's got 2 quad-core CPUs, and it has the Adreno 430 graphics card. It comes with 3 gigs of RAM, and it's sold in 32, 64, and 128 gigabyte storage variants. Now as for the displays, the 6P is packing a 5.7-inch AMOLED screen which has a pixel per inch density of 518, while the 5X is packing a 5.2-inch 1080p display with a pixel per inch density of 424. Now in theory, the 6P screen is slightly better. AMOLED screens tend to give out more deeper blacks, but overall they're both really nice displays. They have great outdoor visibility, they have overall very good viewing angles and color reproduction. They both can get super bright and they can get super dark as well, so that's a nice touch. And the LCD screen isn't really bad on the 5X. Actually, I'm not a huge QHD guy. I still like 1080p displays, and I'm not yet sold to the whole QHD immersive experience, at least not yet, because to be honest the difference isn't really much. You can't really tell the difference between a QHD display and just a regular 1080p. Now on the software side of things, they're running Google's latest and greatest Android 6.0 Marshmallow. They're actually the first devices to ship with Android 6.0 Marshmallow. Well, obviously they're Nexus devices and they're the latest, so that's what they get. So a lot has been changed, but a lot also looks similar to Lollipop. There have been a few animation tweaks. There are new animations going on. The app drawer is also very similar, but now it's vertical and you also get your top apps on the very top. There is also Google Now on tap, which allows you to hold the home button on a certain screen and then it kind of scans the image on the, or sort of like takes a screenshot. It doesn't really take a screenshot, but it scans the page that you're on and then gives you relevant information via Google Now, which is a nice command. There's also something new here which not many reviewers I noticed are talking about. There's actually an always on OK Google command with a dedicated processor for it. So just like previous Motorola devices, or still Motorola devices have a dedicated processor which allows a custom Moto voice command. Well, this won't really be custom, but you can say OK Google when the screen is off and it turns it on, and this you can do a Google search or anything else. There's also a new silence mode with priority settings. This time you can also get events from your calendar and it can pull that off. So if you have a meeting on your calendar, your phone will automatically go on silence once it reaches that period in time. And there's also this thing called doze, which is pretty sweet, which we'll get on later when I'll talk about battery life, but it's really nice. It's supposed to not kill any battery at all when you're not using the phones, which is a nice touch and a huge welcome, and a very much needed welcome after so long. They also have ambient modes, and I actually noticed that the ambient mode worked better on the 6P. Now, there are a few reasons to this. First off is because, well, the 6P has Amoled Display, so when you pick the display up at nighttime, just a certain area that lights up is the area that's actually going to light up. Well, on the 5X, at nighttime, if you pick it up, it's actually the entire screen that lights up. Regardless of time, even during the daytime, you can't really tell if the entire screen lights up, but it's more prominent and obvious during night times. Now, as for the cameras, in order to access your cameras, it's very nice. It's a quick shortcut. You just double tap your power button and you're right into the camera. Now, I did find the 6P to be maybe a hair ever so slightly faster in opening the camera than the 5X, but nonetheless they were both pretty damn fast and they both opened the camera apps very quickly and very nicely. Now, as for the camera software overall, they're both very similar. Actually, they're both exactly the same thing. You've got the same settings. You've got lens blur, panorama, and then you've got photosphere, and then you've got your video mode, which you can access by swiping towards the left. Some major differences, though, are that the 6P actually shoots slow-mo up to 240 frames per second, and it also has a burst mode, which you can do by holding down the shutter button on the 6P, and it actually takes a burst of pictures, and it also creates like a tiny little gift, and it gives you all the pictures nicely organized in sort of like an album, so you can choose whichever ones you want and whichever you want to get rid of. Now, the rear cameras, as I mentioned earlier, are the exact same sensors. The difference is with the front sensor. The 5X has a 5 megapixel sensor while the 6P has an 8 megapixel sensor. Now, here are some picture samples, the 5X on top, 6P down below, and they're more or less the exact same thing. These are all taken with the rear camera in auto mode, so I'm not really sure which one went with HDR or which one didn't. They're more or less the same picture. Again, 5X is up top and 6P is on the bottom. They both have a lot of color, a lot of detail, and they both are not blowing out highlights. They both focus pretty well too. And here's Andy saying hi. And here is some, I think some spicy poutine with jalapenos. That was delicious though, but junk food not good for you. Here's an outdoor picture at nighttime, and it turned out very nice. They both performed very well. Then again, they're the exact same sensors, so I can't really say one's better or one's not, because they pretty much gave me the exact same picture in every scenario. Here are some selfie samples. Left is the 5X and right is the 6P. They both are doing very well. The 6P has a little more detail than the 5X, but nonetheless they're both pretty good. This is just varying in different lighting conditions. This was all taken on auto, so in some cases the 6P turned on HDR, some cases the 5X turned on HDR, but nonetheless both pictures came out very well. The 6P just has a tiny bit more of detail. Now, in terms of performance, they're both really fast in multitasking and switching between apps and running several apps at once. They both perform very well in gaming as well. High graphic intensive games ran pretty much perfectly, and the overall snappiness and performance of using both devices was a joy and a pleasure. Now, on the 5X, however, I did experience some occasional lag on the camera app. So, for example, when I wanted to take a picture, I'd pull the 5X out, double tap the power button, and the camera app will open, but then it would just be loading and it'll be really buggy. And if I tap the shut button to take a picture, it'll pretty much take 5 to 10 seconds, which really pissed me off, and I really lost whatever moment I was in which I wanted to take a picture. And this didn't happen all the time, but it did happen sometimes. So I really hope this can be fixed via a software update. And also Snapchat, I don't know, for whatever reason, I use Snapchat quite a lot, so Snapchat was very buggy. I'm not going to blame Google for this because I know this is not a Google app. This is obviously the developer's fault because Snapchat runs perfectly fine on the 6P. So hopefully with an update, Snapchat can be fixed. But I do blame Google for the camera app being laggy. They really need to fix that because I actually lost a lot of good pictures due to this. Now, in terms of battery life, I had okay battery life on the 5X. Definitely better than the 2013 Nexus 5, but not as good as the Nexus 6P. I was averaging around 3 to maybe 3.5 hours of screen on time with about a full day of use. So off the charger at 8 a.m. and then back on the charger at 10. Usually my phone would die around 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. if I'm going above the 3-hour screen on time, while on the 6P off the charger at 8 a.m. I'll be at 8 p.m. so 12 hours later I'll be with maybe 3 hours of screen on time, and I'll still have 30 to 40% juice left. So that for me is saying a lot about the 6P. Despite having a QHD display which drains battery life, it still gives you an hour or two more of screen on time than compared to the Nexus 5X. But both do have Android doze, so doze basically sleeps the device if it's not being used. So if it's on standby, it actually sleeps a lot of the apps. I found this a little I found this a little distracting at first because I did notice, so for example, if I go to sleep and maybe an important email came through and maybe I wanted to hear the notification tone for that email, or I was waiting for it, I wouldn't know because my phone is slept and that notification isn't going to come through because the phone has dozed off that certain app. So I'm not going to know whatever notification comes through unless I unlock the device. Then all the notifications start coming in. You obviously can turn this off from the settings menu, but I believe I should have gotten a warning or something saying that, you know, these apps are not going to notify you once they're in doze mode. So that was a little bummer, a little inconvenience, you know, first world problems. But then again, whatever app you don't want to put on doze, you can simply go to the settings and uncheck it, or, you know, not optimize it, and it won't sleep, and it'll stay on and give you notifications regardless of if you're using the device or not. Now, overall, I feel that these two are actually pretty great devices. They're both running Google's latest and greatest Android 6.0 Marshmallow. They have more or less the exact same camera sensors. The main deciding factor, however, will be battery life, storage variants, and performance, as the 6P has slightly better battery life. It comes in higher storage variants if you want something up to 128 gigabytes. And it's also the higher spec model, so performance wise, at least on the camera app, that's the major area where I noticed a difference in performance. The 6P did perform better than the 5X. Now, technically, the 6P does have another advantage, or why you'd want to get it over the 5X, which is the fact that it has a QHD display. But as I mentioned earlier, for me personally, I could care less, and I don't really see a humongous difference between QHD and 1080p displays. But if you're into that kind of stuff, then you might prefer the QHD on the 6P than the 5X's 1080p display. Anyways guys, that's pretty much it from me on this video. If you liked it, please feel free to give it a thumbs up and do subscribe to stay tuned to more of my stuff. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comment section below, or you can follow me on any of my social media networks. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Take care. Bye bye.